Good evening and welcome to Fireside Fairytales. My name is Rory and this is... Ooh, that's a little loud. This is the Tuesday night show where we read Folklore and Fairy Tales live. If you've never been here before, well, welcome. And I'm glad to have you around the fire here. But we're going to be looking at a version of Cinderella tonight. Now, I will say a little bit on Cinderella beforehand. But before I get to any of that, if you are new here, you should know that down in the description below, when this video is not live, there will be timestamps. And those timestamps will jump you ahead to the beginning of the story if that's all you really want to hear, or if you're like, why isn't this guy shutting up and telling a story? You can jump right ahead. And if you are interested in this story, it is from a book called Celtic... let me make sure I get this right. Celtic Fairytales, yes. Celtic Fairytales, which is a collection in the public domain. You can get it at Project Gutenberg. Not something you can read more of. One that we've read from before. GS says good evening. Good evening, GS. If you are new here, also there is a live chat. And down in the live chat, you can join and tell me your thoughts on the story as it goes along. I do enjoy seeing those, you know. Obviously, ideally, we'd be in a room together if I'm telling stories, but barring that, the live chat fills the gap. I think that's all the housekeeping. So I'm going to go on and tell a little bit about Cinderella, because our stories are about Cinderella. Effectively, she's not called Cinderella in this story, but I'm going to tell you briefly the origin of that name. As I understand it anyways, I'm not a scholar. Genera says, hello, Genera. I don't recall seeing you here before, so welcome. But this is one, I don't want to oversell it, but I will say it's not clickbait to say this is one weird rendition of the Cinderella story. It takes a lot of turns that I did not see coming. It is one of the only ones I've ever read that does not end at the slipper. I would say the slipper marks at best 60% of the story done. So it is the only story we'll be reading tonight, which is a bit unusual, but I couldn't really tell how long it would take. So we might run very short. Who knows? So with all of that said, let me say something briefly about Cinderella. Cinderella, obviously made famous by Disney. That's the version most of us know. And it is a pretty good reflection of the Cinderella myth. Cinderella, however... as a story form, forgetting about the name for a minute, goes way back. I believe it's been argued that there's a ancient Greek folklore story about a maiden in a house marrying a prince, I want to say, of Egypt. I'm digging in some old memories here, but that goes back thousands of years. And I would say Cinderella is perhaps the most common story you see versioned, if I'm allowed that noun to become a verb, at least throughout Europe, which is mostly the different sources that I read. But as I understand it, it goes far beyond that. The tale of a young, maid girl in terrible conditions, eventually marrying a prince, based on the magic interventions of some usually old lady, but something else can be the case as well, is an extraordinarily common tale. And as a result, there is so many versions of it. Now, the term Cinderella, the name Cinderella, as I understand it, this comes from a reliable source who I won't name, in case I am misrepresenting it or forgetting. But as I understand it, Cinderella is a bit of a placeholder name. It might have been from Grimm Brothers. And what I mean by a placeholder name is in a lot of these old folklore tales, they don't actually give names to the protagonists. They are like the boy or some guy. And so when they were writing it down, a lot of translators ran into problems of it just was confusing in writing to not have a protagonist name. And so they fell back on what were sort of standard form names. In the case of Cinderella, as I understand it, it refers to a cinder girl, the person who would sit by the fire and sort of tend to the cinders and ashes of the fire. Anybody who knows better is welcome to correct me in chat. I will not take that personally if I'm wrong about this understanding of it. But as I believe the case to be, it's a name that is used as a placeholder in many places, but it also reflects the low station of Cinderella. Generis's first time here for Alive. Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you for coming by. So the name Cinderella actually comes up in a lot of places, not just Cinderella stories, but because it got so famous for this particular format of story with the slipper and everything like that, it's kind of become part and parcel with the Cinderella style of story, or the Cinderella form of story. And I'm fine with that. But there's actually a boy version of the name that I can't think of right now that is used by Asbjornsen and Moe in their tales, which is Norwegian collectors of folklore that we've read quite a bit of on this show. Okay. So that's just a little bit on the name Cinderella, its form. Just Fleece It Out is here. Hello, Just Fleece It Out. Thanks for coming by again. So the name of the story is Fair, Brown, and Trembling. And as you will see, that is the name of the three main characters. No explanation is given for it, but I do think they are chosen to sort of give you an impression of their natures. Fair doesn't make a ton of sense, though. When you see how it goes, I don't really understand where that's coming from. Brown is never addressed really at all in this story, and Trembling is our Cinderella character, which I guess makes some sense. If somebody out there knows something about, Celtic traditions more than I, and can tell me why Fair, Brown, and Trembling are significant names here, I would greatly appreciate it, whether you put that in the comments after this video is live or in the live chat. But this is an incredibly odd version of the Cinderella tale that I think is frankly a little more engaging. Just for the twists and turns of it, it is a longer tale than the average Cinderella tale. It does not end at the slipper. And it elaborates a lot on the process of getting to the slipper. So I'm going to have a drink of water and we'll get to the story. My apologies, my first day drinking water, apparently. So our first story tonight, and our only story tonight, is Fair, Brown, and Trembling, which is a Cinderella-type story from the book Celtic Fairytales, a book that is now in the public domain. If you want to go and get it yourself, it's Project Gutenberg. And I do need to apologize for some of the Celtic words. It's pretty much impossible to find pronunciation guides for them, so most of this is guesses, and I apologize. King Hugh Caracca lived in Tir Conal, and he had 3 daughters, whose names were Fair, Brown, and Trembling. Now Fair and Brown had new dresses and went to church every Sunday. Trembling, however, was kept at home to do the cooking and the work, and they would not let her out of the house at all. I can actually turn the audio down just a bit more. For Trembling was more beautiful than those other 2 sisters, and they were in dread that Trembling might marry before themselves. So they carried on this way for 7 years. And at the end of the 7 years, the son of the king of Amania fell in love with the eldest sister. One Sunday morning, after the other 2 had gone to church, the old henwife, just to pause for a footnote, a henwife is a woman who takes care of the chickens. So you can see this as sort of a servant of the household, but probably on the more seasoned end, older woman, came into the kitchen to Trembling and said, "It's at church you ought to be this day instead of working here at home." "How could I go?" said Trembling. "I have no clothes good enough to wear at church, and if my sisters were to see me, they kill me for going out of the house." I'll give you, said the henwife, a finer dress than either of them has ever seen. And now tell me what dress you will have. I'll have, said Trembling, a dress as white as snow, and green shoes for my feet. Then the henwife put on the cloak of darkness, clipped a piece from the old clothes the young woman had on, and asked for the whitest robes in the world, and the most beautiful that can be found, and a pair of 2 green shoes. That moment, she had the robe and the shoes, and she brought them back to Trembling, who put them on immediately. And when Trembling was dressed and ready, the henwife said, I have a honey bird here to sit on your right shoulder, and a honey finger to put on your left. I googled honey finger. I cannot figure out what it is. If it's a plant or something, someone let me know. At the door stands a milk-white mare with a golden saddle for you to sit on and a golden bridle to hold in your hand. Well, Trembling sat high atop that golden saddle, and when she was ready to start, the henwife said, You must not go inside the door of the church. And the minute the people rise up at the end of Mass, do you make off and ride home as fast as the mare will take you. So Trembling came to the door of the church, and there was no one inside who could get a glimpse of her, but was striving to know who she was. And when they saw her hurrying away at the end of Mass, they ran out to overtake her. But there was no use in their running, for she was away before any man could come near her. And from the minute she left the church till she got home, she overtook the wind before her and outstripped the wind behind her. Well, she came down at the door and went in and found the henwife had dinner ready. So she put off the white robes and had on her old dress in a twinkling of an eye. And when the 2 sisters came home, the henwife asked, Have you any news today from the church? We have great news, said they. We saw a wonderful grand lady at the church door. With the likes of robes she had, we have never seen on a woman before. It's little that was thought of our dresses beside what she had on, and there wasn't a man in the church, from the king to the beggar, but was trying to look at her and know who she was. Well, the sisters would give no peace till they had 2 dresses like the robes of that strange lady. But honeybirds and honey fingers were not to be found. Next Sunday, the 2 sisters went to church again and left the youngest at home again to cook dinner. After they had gone, as it was before, the henwife came in and asked, Well, will you go to church today? I would go, said Trembling, if I could get the going. What robe will you wear? Asked the henwife. The finest black satin that can be found, and red shoes for my feet. And what color do you want the mare to be? I want her to be so black, so glossy that I can see my reflection in her body. Well, the henwife put on her cloak of darkness and asked for the robes and the mare, and that moment she had them. And when Trembling was dressed, the henwife put the honey bird on her right shoulder and the honey finger on her left. The saddle on the mare was silver, and so was the bridle, and how it caught the light. When Trembling sat in the saddle and was going away, the henwife ordered her again strictly not to go inside the door of the church, but to rush away as soon as the people rose at the end of Mass, and hurry home on the mare before any man could stop her. Well, that Sunday, the people were more astonished than ever, and gazed at her more than the first time, and all they were thinking was to know who she was. But they had no chance. For the moment the people rose at the end of Mass, she slipped from the church and was in her silver saddle and home before a man could stop and talk to her. Well, the henwife again had dinner ready, and Trembling took off her satin robe and had on her clothes, her old clothes, before her sister got home. "What news have you today?" asked the henwife of the sisters when they came from the church. "Oh, we saw the grand strange lady again, and it's little that any man could think of our dresses after looking at the robes of satin that she had on. And all at church, from high to low, had their mouths open, gazing at her, and no man was looking at us." The two sisters gave neither rest nor peace till they got dresses as nearly like the strange lady's robes as they could. Of course, they were not so good, for the like of those robes could not be found in Arran, which is obviously a Celtic town. I believe that's Ireland. And when the third Sunday came, Fair and Brown went to the church dressed in black satin, black as they could find, and they left Trembling at home to work away in the kitchen, and told her to be sure to have dinner ready when they get back. After they'd gone and were out of sight, well, the henwife came to the kitchen and said, "Well, my dear, are you for church today?" "I would go if I had a new dress to wear." "I'll get you any dress you ask for." "And what dress would you like?" asked the henwife. "A dress as a rose from just the waist down, but white as snow from the waist up, and a cape of green on my shoulders, and a hat on my head with red and white and a green feather in it, and shoes for my feet with the toes red and the middle white and the back heels green." Honestly, it might be a little much. Not to judge you, Trembling, but that's a lot of color. But the henwife didn't think so, and so put on the cloak of darkness and wished for all these things and had them. And when Trembling was dressed, the henwife put the honey bird on her right shoulder and the honey finger on her left, and placed the hat on her head, and clipped a few hairs from one lock and a few from another with her scissors, and that moment the most beautiful golden hair was flowing down over the girl's shoulders. And then the henwife asked what kind of mare she would ride, and she said white with blue and gold-colored diamond-shaped spots all over her body, on her back a saddle of gold, and on her head a golden bridle. Can you imagine seeing that ride up to your church? Wild. The mare stood there before the door, and a bird sitting between her ears. I find that hard to picture. I don't know what that means, to be honest. Which began to sing as soon as Trembling was in the saddle, and never stopped till she came home from the church. The fame of the beautiful strange lady had by this point gone out throughout the whole world. And all the princes and great men that were in it came to church that very Sunday, each one hoping that it was himself who would have her home with him after Mass. Maybe not that many people. And so the son of the king of Amania forgot about the eldest sister and remained outside of the church so as to catch the strange lady before she could hurry away this week. And the church was more crowded than ever before, and there were 3 times as many outside. There was such a throng before the church that Trembling could only just come inside the gate. Because usually there are fences around churches, just to help you picture that. Often it was graveyards as well, but it doesn't seem to be the case here. As soon as the people were rising at the end of Mass, the lady slipped through the gate and was in the golden saddle in an instant. Must have been quite the Mass for them not to notice her arrive. But anyways, she swept away as fast as the wind. But if she was, the Prince of Amania was this time at her side, and he seized her by the foot, and she ran with the mare for 30 perches, and never let go of the beautiful lady till the shoe slipped from her foot, and he was left behind with it in his hand. Well, she came home as soon as possible. In fact, she came home as fast as the mare could carry her, and was thinking all the time that the henwife would kill her for losing the shoe. But seeing her so vexed and so changed in the face, the old woman asked, "What's the trouble that's on you now?" "Oh, I've lost one of the shoes off my feet," said Trembling.
"Ah, don't you mind that, and don't be vexed," said the henwife. "Maybe it's the best thing that's ever happened to you."
Well, then Trembling gave up all the things that she had to the henwife, put on her old clothes, and went to work in the kitchen. And when the sisters came home, the henwife asked,
"Have you news from the church?"
"We have indeed," they said, "for we saw the grandest sight today. The strange lady come again, in grander array than before. On herself and the horse she rode were the finest colours of the world, and between the ears of the horse was a bird which never stopped singing from the time she came till she went away, and the lady herself, the most beautiful woman ever seen by man in Erin." Well, after Trembling had disappeared from the church, the son of the king of Amania said to the other king's son, "I will have that lady for my own." And they all said, "You didn't win her just by taking the shoe off her foot. You'll have to win her by the point of your sword. You'll have to fight for her with us before you can call her your own." "Well," said the son of the king of Amania, "when I find the lady that the shoe will fit, I'll fight for her, never fear, before I leave her to any of you." And there was a murmur in the crowd, for all the king's sons were uneasy and anxious to know who was she that lost the shoe. And so they began to travel all over Erin to try and find her. The Prince of Amania and all the others went in great company together, and they made the whole round of Erin. They went everywhere, north, south, east, and west. They visited every place where a woman was to be found, and left not a house in the kingdom they did not search, to know could they find the woman the shoe fit, not caring whether she was rich or poor, or of high or low degree. The Prince of Amania always kept the shoe, though, and when the young woman saw it, they had great hopes, for it was of proper size, and neither large nor small, and it would beat any man to know of what material it was made. One thought it would fit her if she just cut a little from her great toe, and another, with too short a foot, put something in the tip of her stocking, but no use, they only spoiled their own feet and were curing them for months afterwards. The two sisters, Fair and Brown, sisters of Trembling, heard that the princes of the world were looking all over for Erin for the woman that could wear the shoe, and every day they were talking of trying it on. And one day, Trembling spoke up and said, Maybe it's my foot that the shoe will fit." "The breaking of the dog's foot on you? Why say so when you were at home every Sunday?" They were that way, waiting and scolding the younger sister till the princes were near their place. And the day they were to come, the sisters put Trembling in a closet and locked the door. So when the company came to the house, the Prince of Amania gave the shoe to the sisters, but though they tried and tried, of course it fit neither of them. "Is there any other young woman in the house?" asked the prince. "There is," said Trembling, speaking up in the closet, and out of turn. I'm here." "Oh, we have her for nothing but to put out the ashes," said the sisters. But the prince and the others wouldn't leave the house till they had seen her, for they wanted to check all women. And so the two sisters had to open the door, and when Trembling came out, the shoe was given to her, and it fitted exactly. The Prince of Amania looked at her and said, You are the woman the shoe fits, and you are the woman I took the shoe from." Then Trembling spoke up and said, "Do you stay here till I return?" And then she went to the hen wife's house, and the old woman put on that cloak of darkness, and got everything for her she had the first Sunday at church, and she put on the white mare, in the same fashion. And then Trembling rode along the highway to the front of the house, and all who saw her for the first time said, "This is the lady we saw at church." And then she went away a second time, and a second time she came back on the black mare in the second dress which the henwife gave her, and all who saw her the second Sunday said, "That is the lady we saw at church." And a third time she asked for a short absence, but soon came back on the third mare and in the third dress, and all who saw her the third time said, "That is the lady we saw at church." And every man was satisfied and knew that she was the woman. Well, then all the princes and great men spoke up and said to the son of the king of Amania, "You'll have to fight now for her before we let her go with you." "I'm here before you, ready for combat," answered the princess. And then the son of the king of Lachlan stepped forward, and the struggle began, and terrible it the struggle was. They fought for 9 hours. Next day, the son of the King of Spain fought for another 6 hours and yielded his claim to the prince. On the third day, the son of the King of Nerfois fought for 8 hours and then stopped. And the fourth day, the son of the King of Greece fought for another 6 hours before he surrendered. And it was on the fifth day that no more strange princes wanted to fight. And all the sons of kings in Erin said they would not fight with a man of their own land, that the strangers had had their chance. And as no others came to claim the woman, she belonged of right to the son of the King of Amania. Anyone who knows a little bit about history knows that all the sons of kings in Erin said they would not fight a man of their own land is such a lie. Anyways, real history aside. The marriage day was fixed, and the invitations were sent out. When the wedding was over, the king's son brought the bride home. And when the time came, a son was born. And the young woman sent for her eldest sister, Fair, to be with her and care for her while she was with child, or recovering from birth. One day, when Trembling was well, and I mentioned that note because took me a minute to pick up on this. What they mean by when Trembling was well was when Trembling had recovered from childbirth. And when her husband was away hunting, the two sisters went out for a walk. When they came to the seaside, beautiful, the sun over it, sparkling like a sea of diamonds, and Fair, her eldest sister, pushed Trembling into the water. And wouldn't you know it, at that very moment, a great whale welled up out of the tide and swallowed Trembling. I kind of wish this was the Disney version at this point. The eldest sister came home alone. And when the husband asked, "Where's your sister?" "She has gone home to father in Ballyshannon. Now that I am well, I don't need her." "Well," said the husband, looking at her, "I'm in dread that my wife's gone." "Oh, no," said she. "It's my sister, Fair, that's gone." Now, since the sisters were very much alike, and the narrative never told you that prior, the prince was still in doubt, but not completely convinced. And so that night he put his sword between them and said, "If you are my wife, the sword will get warm. If not, it will stay cold." Love to know the metaphysics on this. And of course, in the morning when he rose up, the sword was as cold as when he put it there. Well, it happened when the two sisters were walking by the seashore, flashback, that a little cowboy was down by the water, minding the cattle, and saw Fair push Trembling into the sea. And the next day, when the tide came in, that same cowboy saw the whale swim up and throw her out on the sand. And when she was on the sand, she said to the cowboy, "When you go home in the evening with the cows, tell the master that my sister Fair pushed me into the sea. yesterday, and that a whale swallowed me and then threw me out. But we'll come again and swallow me with the coming of the next tide, and then you'll go out with the tide, and come again with tomorrow's tide, and throw me again on this strand. The whale will cast me out 3 times. I'm under the enchantment of this whale. I cannot leave the beach or escape myself, unless my husband saves me before I'm swallowed the 4th time. I shall be lost. He must come and shoot the whale with a silver bullet when he turns on the broad of his back. Under the breast fin of the whale is a reddish-brown spot. My husband must hit him in that spot, for it is the only place in which he can be killed. When the cowboy got home, the eldest sister gave him a draught of oblivion, and he did not tell. Just as a note here, this is a pretty standard thing in folklore. The draught of oblivion, there's 10 other names for it that come up, but it basically is usually a thing you drink and it makes you forget. Very common for these stories. The next day he went to the sea, the cowboy. The whale came and cast Trembling on shore again, and she asked the boy, "Did you tell the master what I told you to tell him?" "I did not," said he. I forgot." "How did you forget?" asked she. "Well, the woman of the house gave me a drink that made me forget." "Well, don't forget telling him this night. If she gives you a drink, don't take it from her." Well, as soon as the cowboy came home, the eldest sister offered him a drink, and he refused to take it until he had delivered his message and told all to the master. Well, the 3rd day, the prince went down rather than the cowboy, and he had with him his gun, and it was loaded with a silver bullet. He was not long down when that whale came and threw Trembling upon the beach. Pardon me, I know we're in this, but I need to drink a little bit of water. He was not long down when the whale came and threw Trembling upon the beach as 2 days before. She had no power to speak to her husband, though, till he had killed the whale. Then the whale went out and turned over once on the broad of his back and showed the spot, but for a moment only. And it was that moment that the prince fired. He had but one chance, and a short one at that, but he took it. He hit the spot, and the whale, mad with pain, made the sea all around red with blood and died. And it was that minute Trembling was able to speak, and went home with her husband, who sent word to her father of what the eldest sister had done. The father came in and told him any death he chose to give her, to give it. Because remember that father is the king. Whatever. The prince told the father he would leave her life and death with himself. And so the father took his daughter and put her out then on the sea in a barrel with provisions in it for 7 years. In time, Trembling had a second... I know you thought that must be the end. It's not. In time, Trembling had a second child, a daughter, the prince. And she, as a thanks, sent the cowboy to school and trained him up as one of their own children, and said, "If the little girl that is born to us now lives, no other man in the world will get her but him." The cowboy and the prince's daughter lived on till they married. And the mother said to her husband, "You could not have saved me from the whale, but for the little cowboy. On that account, I don't grudge him my daughter." the son of the king of Amania and Trembling, had 14 children, and they lived happily till the two died of old age. Gia says, well, I never saw this coming. Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, it's not just Disney. Normally, that is the end of the story. It's not just Disney. Normally, the story does end with her fitting the shoe, and that's, she marries. I will say one thing that it has some consistencies with. It is really common for them to somehow, her sisters, to be in a situation where she controls their fate or their punishment, and she shows them mercy. That's a really common trope in it. Hexagram Witch came in. Hello, Hexagram Witch. Said, what a wild story. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for coming by and joining in on the chat. By the way, if you guys didn't like the story, the best way to give a little digital applause is to click the like button. It's not for algorithm. We're reading Folklore on YouTube. This is never going to be a big thing. It's just a way to say, hey, cool. Or, you can say hello in the chat. But you don't have to. If you do enjoy this stuff, I do this every Tuesday, though. So do consider subscribing. And there's a whole playlist of 2 years. They get better as time goes on. Maybe don't start way at the bottom of the list. Where it was just me against a blank wall. But there is many old stories that you can listen to if you enjoy this sort of stuff. And on Thursdays we play solo tabletop RPGs and do ride-alongs and stuff. It's a different vibe, but I don't know. I like both of it, so maybe someone else does too. But yeah, this story came from the book Celtic Fairytales. It is far and away the most interesting version of Cinderella I've read, and there are many versions of Cinderella. I'm just repeating stuff I said at the beginning, but yeah. Gia says, I love hearing these old tales that are not what we commonly hear. Yeah, I think in particular, I have to give credit to Jürgen Hubert, who is our contemporary translator of German folklore that we often read, for translating the less typical fairy tale stuff. I like fairy tales, don't get me wrong. This I would count as a fairy tale, and I enjoy them. But he particularly likes folklore, which is very much more urban legends and such. Janera says, this would be awesome as a film or show. I think that often about these stories. The one, I know I keep harping on this, the one that stands out for me that I think could make a beautiful movie. I mean, I am a writer. I suppose I could write it, but I feel unprepared. Is Jack of Solem and the Gan Finn, which is probably 2 years ago I read it on the channel. It's called something about the bag of wind business. It's from Jonas Lee's book, Weird Tales of the Northern Seas. He was a Norwegian writer from the 19th century. And we read that whole book on the channel, and I enjoyed every story in it. But that story in particular about the boat maker and the bag of wind business and all of that, it's such a beautiful story. I think that's ripe for being a movie. But it's also a reminder that, narrative is a community-built thing. These are not tales from individuals exactly. These were tales built by communities, and there are so many of them. So I really appreciate everyone, Janera, Hexagram Witch, GS, coming down and Just Fleece It Out, coming down and checking it out. I think at this point this counts as rambling, so I won't take too much more of your time other than to say thank you so much. Everybody who came to listen to the story tonight, you can go and tell your friends that you've heard the Celtic Cinderella and it was better because she gets swallowed by a whale. Thank you so much. I'll keep the fire warm for you. You have a good sleep.